The asteroid slowly rotated in the shadow of Titan, shrouded in inky darkness. At first glance, it was just a piece of rock lost among the rings, but the scanners showed something else. There was something artificial hidden in the depths. Tunnels, huge reservoirs of energy, structures similar to nerve nodes. The Reptilians built bases all over the system, but this one was special. Their main weapon was located here, a gravity cannon that could tear the Earth apart with a single salvo. The fleet of the Union of Colonies could not wait. The attack had to be lightning fast and accurate. The Goliath warriors locked themselves in their pods, checking their weapons one last time. There was a cold, tense silence inside, broken only by the breathing in the helmets. The gravity compensators shut down, and the capsules tore off the deck, rushing down through the gravitational anomaly. Laser rangefinders recorded the distortions of space, as if the asteroid itself was changing shape, adapting to the observers. The commander of the Goliath, Captain Harper, saw a three-dimensional model of the terrain in his tactical visor, but the lines were shaking, breaking, disappearing, as if the intelligence was outdated right in real time. The pulsating field around the base did not allow the fleet to strike. They had to attack manually, through tunnels. When the capsules entered the atmosphere, the space around them froze, as if before a storm. Then the madness began. Sensors went wild. Compasses were drowned in the chaos of magnetic surges. Bodies were squeezed by an invisible force. The landing turned into a fall into the unknown. The first blow came unexpectedly. One of the capsules shattered into pieces even before landing. The explosion was strange, as if not from a weapon, but from internal pressure. The rest crashed to the surface, breaking through a layer of unknown material that looked like petrified flesh. Harper broke out, holding his rifle at the ready, and saw that they had fallen deeper than planned. Instead of open tunnels, fused walls dotted with nerve-like wires stretched around. The squad activated infrared filters, but it didn't help. The darkness was different. Not just the absence of light, but something alive, watching. A silhouette flashed in the distance, tall, with long limbs covered with segmented armor. The Reptilians stared directly at Harper, but did not move. "Communication with orbit is lost." Sergeant Greaves' voice sounded muffled, as if muffled by water or cloth. Harper checked the frequencies. The jamming was coming from the base itself. It was not an ordinary station built according to the usual scheme. They didn't invade the base. They were already inside it. The tunnels stretched, curved, and disappeared into the unknown, but it was dangerous to go further without instruments. Harper signaled, "Seal off the perimeter." The soldiers moved clearly and smoothly, but it seemed as if their footsteps were echoing with a delay. The Reptilian disappeared into the darkness, leaving a shimmering trail in the air, as if the very fabric of space was shaking. Something was wrong here, but there was no time for analysis. "Keep moving. Code Goliath. Battle groups in position." Harper stepped forward, the rifle sliding into a firing stance. Someone whispered his name behind him. He turned around abruptly, but there was only a squad behind him. Plasma lanterns illuminated the dead, unnaturally smooth walls, as if they had been polished for millions of years. Someone whispered his name again, but now the sound came from his own helmet. At that moment, a red light flashed in the depths of the corridor, and something huge moved in the darkness. Harper understood that this was not just a base. It's a mind, and he already knew they were here. They advanced slowly, holding their weapons at the ready. The walls of the tunnels pulsed as if in time with their footsteps, and infrared sensors showed movement, but did not record specific targets. The darkness breathed, as if something was hiding in it, watching, but not attacking. Harper resisted the urge to check his ammunition, an old superstition. If you count bullets in battle, you'll die before you finish. Something was wrong in the air. The sound of footsteps distorted the space, as if the walls were repeating their movements with a delay of a couple of seconds. Griff brought up a structural analysis of the rock, but the data was meaningless. The tunnels were not made of stone, but of metal mixed with organic matter. "Commander, look, are there people here?" Private Layla's voice faltered as the lantern light illuminated the dark silhouettes on the walls. They hung embedded in metal, naked bodies intertwined with structures. Their faces were dead, but their eyes were moving. Harper took a step closer and saw the reflection of his own fighters. Exact copies of the Goliath, trapped in this monstrous cocoon. One of the figures opened its mouth, but instead of a sound, there was only a hiss, similar to radio interference. The soldiers could not stand it. They opened fire. The distorted bodies trembled, but did not die. The bullets entered the flesh, leaving ragged holes, but after a moment the wounds closed, as if they had never existed. "We can't run." Harper gave the order, realizing that they were trapped themselves. The walls closed in behind them, and the light from the lanterns began to fade. The darkness thickened unnaturally quickly, drowning out the signals, and the fighters felt pressure, as if something had dug into their minds. The sounds were distorted. The words of command were repeated belatedly, like an echo in the abyss. When the light flashed back on, the figures on the walls had disappeared, leaving only flickering shadows. They weren't alive, but they weren't dead either. Griff tried to get in touch with Orbit, but the answer was his own voice, pronounced with mechanical precision. Harper realized that the base wasn't just studying them, it was copying their minds. Every signal, every cry, even fear, all this was processed into new forms of life. They were not invaders. They were the stuff for this thing, and the longer they stayed here, the less they became themselves. "Continue driving. If we blow up the reactor, we'll burn this nightmare to hell." Harper knew it might be their only chance. But deep down, he understood. They have already become part of this base. They just haven't realized it yet. They went deeper and deeper, and the tunnels became narrower, closer, as if the walls adjusted to them, breathing in time with their movements. The light of the lanterns was losing its power, absorbed by the thick blackness, which was no longer just a shadow. It was an organism reacting to their presence, watching, analyzing. Structural analysis showed anomalies. The metal contained elements of organic origin, but did not resemble any known compound. It seemed that the base itself was alive, and they were moving not through corridors, but through neural channels. Communication with the orbit was completely lost. The signals did not go beyond this place, as if they were swallowed. Damn it. This isn't a station. It's something else, more complicated. Griff scanned the walls, but the screens showed emptiness, as if the tunnel material existed outside the dimensions that the instruments could detect. At that moment, the squad heard sounds. Thuds coming from the depths. They were irregular, like the pulse of a creature dying, but unwilling to give up. Harper knew it wasn't the wind. It wasn't the movement of the air. The base was responding to their presence. Step by step they approached the core of the complex. Here, the floor was no longer solid, but something elastic, slippery, and veined, pulsating like blood vessels. The fire of plasma lanterns illuminated a huge room where a massive structure like a crystalline cocoon stood in the middle of the wall. Thick cables came out of it, stretching into the floor and walls, intertwining in a complex pattern. But what was most striking was what was inside the cocoon. "It's not a car." Layla's voice was almost a whisper, but it echoed through the hall, as if something more than just a squad had heard it. Figures floated inside the transparent shell, hundreds of bodies frozen in a dense, viscous liquid. People, soldiers, the colonists. Their faces were distorted in a silent scream, their eyes alive, staring into the void. Harper stepped closer, and the distorted features of one of the prisoners looked familiar. He recognized himself. "Get back!" Griff lunged back, but it was too late. The space distorted, as if something had deliberately slowed down their reaction. I could hear my own voice repeating itself with a few seconds of hesitation. Harper turned, and his own face blinked from the other side of the glass, repeating the movements with a delay. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a mind that created copies of themselves. "We can't destroy him. We're already a part of him." Layla backed away, her weapon at the ready, but her hands were shaking. Something changed in the air. The walls were shaking. The structure of the hall was shifting, as if they were no longer in the same space. "Prepare to explode!" Harper yanked the detonator off his chest mount, but the timer wouldn't start. The panel did not respond. The system was not working. Griff tried to reset the code to manual start, but his fingers just froze in the air, not obeying. He's reading us. Right now. Griff whirled around, his face contorted in horror. He pulled out a gun and put it to his head. Harper managed to draw his weapon, but there was no awareness in Griff's eyes anymore, only emptiness reflecting their faces, as if they were no longer themselves. The core of the complex was pulsating, and something was stirring in the depths of the crystalline cocoon. The base was not a weapon in the classical sense. She was a mind, a mechanism for absorbing consciousness. They couldn't beat her because she already knew them, and now she was absorbing their fear, preparing for the next step. Harper clamped down on Grief's arm, preventing him from blowing off his skull, but the sergeant continued to convulse. His eyes rolled back in his head, and his lips trembled as if he were speaking without making a sound. Layla tried to turn on the biomonitor, but it showed 0. The vulture was already dead, although his body was moving. Harper stepped back, clutching his rifle. They were still alive, but now he wasn't sure how much of themselves they were. The walls trembled, gravity faltered, and footsteps echoed. There is no connection. There is no way out. We're not getting out. Lila's voice was quiet, empty, as if she'd already figured it out before him. She was looking at herself, at the replica inside the crystal, which was moving half a second later than she was. With a delay, but precisely repeating every movement, every breath. These are not copies. It's us. Harper realized it too late. The memory slipped, the moments were repeated, but shifted in time. He remembered the assault, but he couldn't tell when they had landed. The base was playing with their perception, substituting reality. At some point, he realized that he couldn't remember how many times they had already discussed this. A screech went through the tunnels, the walls pulsed, and something began to come out of the darkness. Tall, thin silhouettes covered with biomechanical plates moved soundlessly, but their shadows swayed apart from their bodies. The Reptilians did not shoot or attack. They just watched, studied, and recorded reactions. They didn't fight humans because the war was won before they landed. Do you understand? They've already defeated us. They don't kill us because they don't need to. Lila's voice faltered. Ahead, the brain of the base pulsed, filling the space with an alien presence that did not attack, but adapted. Harper pulled the trigger. The shot merged with the shot in his head. He saw himself as if in a reflection, and at the same moment he felt the bullet enter his body. For a moment, he realized that it wasn't him who was shooting, but him. But from the other side. A real-time reflection. But who was the real one? Layla opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. Space was distorted. Reality broke like glass. All three of them saw themselves from the outside, as if they were watching a movie recorded by someone else. They lived this moment over and over again, but they didn't know which one was the first one and which one was already a copy. The walls around lit up with a dark light, and the pulsation of the base accelerated. The gravity cannon was charging. They were no longer in control of events. They turned into them. Harper couldn't remember the last time he'd realized he was alive. At some point, the line between what was real and what was reflected blurred. They were moving forward, but with each passing second they were less in control of themselves. Grief was still standing nearby, even though Harper had seen him shoot himself a minute earlier. Or was it not him? Layla was silent, her face reflected in the walls, but her lips moved belatedly, repeating the unspoken words. They reached the center. The crystalline cocoon trembled, its insides blurred, turning into dozens of faces. They recognized themselves in each of them. At that moment, the cannon was activated. The gravitational waves broke out, and the sensors in the fleet detected them too late. The officers on the Helios command bridge were trying to calculate the ejection parameters, but there was no land in the system anymore. She disappeared from databases, from memory, from history. The officers were shouting, but their voices echoed as if they too were no longer themselves. Reality was overwritten, like an erased file on a disk. Harper, we have to... She knew that she no longer remembered what they were supposed to do. He had known her for 1,000 years. He remembered every moment of their lives, but he couldn't remember her name. They looked at each other, and both realized that there was nothing left. Harper took a step forward. He was looking at himself from the outside. I could hear his voice giving a command to himself, but I couldn't control my lips. He was still alive, but he didn't belong to himself. A gravitational wave tore through space, and the asteroid began to move into the depths of space. Now he was flying to other worlds, carrying a new virus. Infected copies of the minds of the fallen. People didn't just lose. They have ceased to exist. The reptilian fleet watched from orbit, but did not attack or pursue. It wasn't necessary. The war is over. Humanity has lost.